All right, guys, welcome back to First Team Fantasy. In this episode, we're going to be covering the Sunday night game, the Monday night game, as well as our waiver suggestions for Week 8. To kick it off with the Sunday night game, we had the Dolphins playing the Eagles in Philadelphia, which was a 31-17 win for the Eagles. On the Dolphins side of the ball, a couple guys had some rough outings. Tua Tagovailoa, 23 of 32, 216 yards, a touchdown, and interception, 11.3 fantasy points, his worst of the season. The Eagles have a good defense. I'm not overreacting to Tua. I still like his start, especially if you have Tyreek Hill, that stack. But, they played the Eagles. I can see how the Dolphins could sputter a little bit. We also saw the same thing with the Bills. They had the very hot start and then sputtered a little bit. Someone who
one thing that I'd like to add, like with the Dolphins offense, is you see that they coming into this game with the number one in rushing and number one in passing. And I think you take away one factor entirely of an offense, which is their ability to run the ball. It makes them a little more one-dimensional. You saw the Eagles pass rush was able to get to and it's when you're able to just tee off on the quarterback, knowing that they are not able to run the ball, it changes the game entirely.
Yeah. And like you said, they shut down the run game. Someone that I said was going to have a rough week. It's just the Eagles' D-line is so dominant. Raheem Mostert, 9 carries, 45 yards, had 1 catch for 6 yards on 3 targets, 6.1 fantasy points. Played 53% of the snaps. His second game in single digits, his other one coming against the Bills, where we kind of saw a similar thing, where you can shut down the run, other than Achane having a solid game, but obviously he's not playing in this one. So Mostert had a very tough week. Until Achane comes back, I'm not crazy worried about him. This was just a very tough matchup. The other running backs to see action was Salvon Ahmed. He had 2 carries for 3 yards. He actually had a catch for 0 yards on 2 targets, 1.3 fantasy points, played 37% of snaps, and then Jeff Wilson returned, only saw 1 pass his way, which he caught for 4 yards, 1.4 fantasy points, 14% of snaps. We're going to see as the weeks go on without Achane there. I think Jeff Wilson will slowly integrate back into that running back too. They did just give him the contract in the offseason. We'll just have to see how it plays out. Someone who obviously is invulnerable to whoever he is playing is Tyreek Hill. 11 catches, 88 yards, and a touchdown on 15 targets, 25.8 fantasy points. I can't remember the exact analyst that said a key to the Seahawks winning this game was bottling up Tyreek Hill, which they did.
The Eagles.
The Eagles analyst said that?
No, you said the Seahawks winning this game.
Oh, the Eagles, yeah. There was an analyst that said that was a key for the Eagles winning this game, and that is just, if 11 catches, 88 yards, and a touchdown is bottling someone up, go ahead. Go off, I guess. There's nothing more to say about Tyreek Hill. He's probably going to end as the wide receiver 1. It's just...
Oh, yeah. I don't think that's...
It is what it is. Jalen Waddle had a solid game for when he was on the field. 6 catches, 63 yards on 6 targets, 12.3 fantasy points. He only played 45% of the snaps because he left the game and eventually returned with that back injury. That's something we're going to have to monitor going into Week 8. And then...
Yeah, he looked like he was in a lot of pain.
Yeah, and surprisingly, the wide receiver 3 who kind of stepped up as the wide receiver 2 when Jalen Waddle went out was Cedric Wilson. He only had 3 targets. He caught 2 of them for 48 yards, 6.8 fantasy points, played 59% of snaps. Chase Claypool played, I think, 8% of the snaps, didn't see a target his way. Braxton Berrios didn't really step up in this game. It's fantasy-wise, you're looking at Tua, Mostert, Achane when he comes back, Hill, and Waddle. That's simply put. And they're high-powered.
Yeah.
Very high-powered.
Yeah. It's not too much. I guess the only reason why this game even looks like it was, it wasn't close.
Mm-mm.
The Dolphins got a pick 6. And without that, it would have been even worse. The Eagles really did dominate this game. Jalen Hurts had a pretty good game. 23 for 31, 279 yards, 2 touchdowns, that 1 interception. Had 11 attempts for 21 yards, got the push touchdown, lost a fumble, 24.3 points for Jalen Hurts. You're going to expect, probably like 20 and above every week for Jalen Hurts. I
Oh yeah.
don't see any reason why not to. He's going to finish as probably a top 3 quarterback. DeAndre Swift, not the best outing, but not bad either. And 15 attempts for 62 yards, 3 catches for 13, 10.5 PPR points. Not horrible. It's not going to kill you based on what other running backs did this week.
Yeah.
Kenneth Gainwell, unfortunately, snagged the touchdown from him. Gainwell was in there on 32% of the snaps, 68 for DeAndre. And Gainwell had 8 attempts, 16 yards, snaked that touchdown. So, I mean, with that, DeAndre Swift goes up to like a little over 16 with the yards on that run. But it is what it is at the end of the day. We know what the Eagles do. And at this point, if you're expecting DeAndre Swift to get every red zone carry, you do not know what you signed up for. It should be obvious. Dallas Goedert, we said was a great start this week. He was 5 for 5, 77 yards, touchdown, 18.7 PPR points.
Yeah.
I mean, as the weeks go on, he's getting more involved in this offense, and he's going to probably end up as, at least a top 10 tight end by the end of the year, if not a top 5. AJ Brown continues to do AJ Brown things. I think it's like his 3rd or 4th game with over 125 receiving yards.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy's amazing. Our running, Jesus, wide receiver 2 or 3 right now. And he's killing it. Another week with 10 plus targets. He had 10 catches on 15 targets, 137 yards, a touchdown, 29.7 PPR points. Drafting AJ Brown was probably my best decision of the draft, and a lot of people who were drafting in that area are probably feeling the same, that picked AJ Brown. So I'm loving that. Devontae Smith, he continues to be out there for almost all the snaps, 96%, 60 snaps. Another 5 target week, caught 4 of them, 49 yards. It would have been nice to see him get the target share he did the last week. Maybe he could have caught a little more, but he was efficient on his targets this week. Unfortunately, he only got 5 of them. You still have to start Devontae Smith every week. You know that it is very clear. AJ Brown is the alpha receiver there. It's very clear why. You see what happens when Jalen throws it to him. I mean, that's not saying anything to go against the skill of Devontae Smith, because he can make contested catches too, but just the body of AJ Brown, that he can go up with, there's 2 guys defending him. He could still come down with the catch like over half of the time. It's insane watching AJ Brown play football. There's a reason why he is the alpha in that receiver room, and it's no denying it. Good Lord. I mean, if he continues on this pace, it's going to be great.
Yeah.
Julio Jones.
Shout out
Julio Jones sighting. Got 1 catch for 3 yards. Played 22% of the snaps. Do not look at him as a fantasy option.
No.
It's cool to see him out there, but Olamide Zaccheaus. Yes, it was Julio's first game, but Zaccheaus still out there for 57% of the snaps. Didn't get a catch, but it's, we're looking at this Eagles offense. You're starting Jalen Hurts, DeAndre Swift every week. You're not even thinking about taking AJ Brown out of your lineup. Dallas Goedert is honestly nearing the same point. Devontae Smith, if you have a whole lot of great depth at wide receiver and you can afford to replace him based on the matchup on any given week, I don't hate that. But a lot of people don't have that, and they're in a position where you have to start Devontae Smith, and he's going to have his boom weeks. We know this, but right now we're just seeing the down ones. And so I think you're still starting him. And then Jake Elliott, another solid outing, kicked a 24-yard field goal, 4 extra points, gave you 7. Eagles defense got an interception, only gave up 11 points, 4 sacks, gave you 10 points. And that was against the Miami Dolphins offense, so I think the Eagles defense, some people might have dropped them. If they're available, go pick them up.
Yeah.
And that'll be all for this game. Moving on to our Monday night game, which was a very surprising upset. San Francisco was favored by 7 points in this one. The over-under was 43.5 points, and they go into Minnesota and lose. Brock Purdy was disappointing with his decision-making in this one, to be 100% honest. He threw 2 pretty bad picks in pretty clutch moments of the game. He also had a Christian McCaffrey fumble in the red zone, which resulted in Minnesota points. And it was a terrible game for the 49ers and like every side of the ball. Jake Elliott missed another 40-yard field goal. It was gross. It was. Brock Purdy, 21 for 30, 272 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 picks, 5 attempts for 19, 14.8 fantasy points. But I don't know. I was expecting you could start him in this one. You know, Kittle's going to eat this, and that. It looked like not having Trent Williams out there affected that team a lot more than not having Debo out there, because the pass rush was just in Purdy's face every time. He was outside of the pocket, making bad decisions, running more than you see him run. It was all over the place for the Niners. They weren't able to run the ball successfully either. McCaffrey, 15 attempts, 45 yards, got that touchdown, which that's 16 games in a row. Shout out Christian McCaffrey, did lose that key fumble, but also caught 3 passes for 51 yards. That gave him 22.6 fantasy points. If you did start him, regardless of all of the scare around the week, good for you. He came through. Eli Mitchell, I mean, CMC was literally out there for 100% of the snaps, even the 4 where Eli Mitchell was out there. And Eli Mitchell got 1 carry for 1 yard in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Jordan Mason didn't play at all.
Yeah.
Brandon Ayuk started the game like how Devontae Adams started the game against the Bears. I mean, got like 3 catches, 4 catches in the first half, was looking great. In the second half, nothing.
Yeah.
So he still finished, gave you a decent day. 5 catches, 57 yards, 10.7. He's out there 98% of the time. I mean, Ayuk looks good. If Trent Williams gets back out there and the Niners are able to start looking better on offense, this is 2 games in a row that they have lost in games they're favored. We'll see. They have the Bengals this upcoming week. Should be a tough matchup, but I don't know. We'll see. You're still starting Brandon Ayuk every week. That's not even a question.
Yeah.
It's genuinely not a question. Juwan Jennings, we saw step up in this one, actually got the most targets on the 49ers, which was very odd to see. I think he just happened to be open, and when you're open, you get targets. With this, I think the biggest takeaway is that when Debo misses, and I think he will be out for another week, the second guy up in the wide receiver room will not be Ronnie Bell, like how we thought it was earlier in the season. We now know it is Juwan Jennings. He played 74% of the snaps. Like I said, got 9 targets, caught 5 of them, 54 yards, 10.4 PPR points. I mean, I don't think anybody started him, but if you did out of desperation, he got you a decent day. Ray McLeod, 2 catches on 3 targets for 20 yards. Not a guy you're interested in, nor Ronnie Bell. Ronnie Bell didn't even play. So yeah, that about settles that, with the Juwan Jennings being the next guy in line. George Kittle had a pretty good day.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like what we say every week, man. You never know what you're going to, so you just have to put him out there. He's out there for almost every single snap. And this game, they happened to need him. He got 7 targets, caught 5 of them for 78 yards. had one rushing attempt for 2 yards, putting him at a solid 13 points. And for a tight end,
That's good.
that's good. I mean, you love that. Kyle Juszczyk, I just had written down in case CMC didn't play. And he didn't do anything on the offensive side of the ball this week. That only happens when the Niners are winning.
Yeah.
And Jake Moody got you 7 points. Like I said, he missed 40. The 40-yard field goal, somehow made the 55-yarder, kicked 2 extra points. And the Niners defense, I thought, was a great start in this one. I was as far from right as possible. They got an interception to start the game, so it was looking great. And then they did nothing but allow 22 points. So they finished with 2. And that's all I got for the Niners. If you have anything you'd like to add.
I wanted to pour salt in the Niners' wound as a Raider fan, and then I remembered that is not a good idea because of how the Raiders performed this week. There is growing some merit to the critiques that say when Brock Purdy is not perfectly surrounded by the best left tackle in the game, all pro weapons at every position, he falters a little bit, and it's kind of shown that he is human and can lose in the regular season. One alarming stat I saw about him is he is near the top of the NFL in missing passes to open receivers. He misses them almost 11% of the time, which is near the top of the list, along with like Jordan Love, people like that. But am I concerned about the Niners? No. They're just so well coached. They have so much talent in every position. They've had a couple down weeks. I mean, McCaffrey, outside of McCaffrey and maybe Kittle, but I'm not concerned about the Niners.
No, they'll figure it out. And I mean, to the thing about Brock Purdy and the not having everything, you got to think the offense operates different when you're not able to hit on all of these short things. The defense doesn't have to look out for it. And the defense doesn't have to look out for it. You all of a sudden don't have all of these openings downfield. So you're forced into making tougher decisions, which he's clearly... That's the thing that he hasn't really had to do, in my opinion, as a passer, is make a lot of those tough decisions because he has so many options out there. And the check down, when your check down is always Christian McCaffrey, that makes life really easy.
Yeah.
But so we're seeing him have to make like tougher decisions, being down in games, having to throw the ball downfield when they know he has to throw the ball downfield. And that's a lot different than a lot of the games that he's played in. So is it a fault to him? I mean, every quarterback gets critiqued when they make mistakes, but to his defense, he is still very young, and these are situations he hasn't been in before. He's going to have to get better if the Niners are going to be successful, but I think that's possible.
Yeah, 100%. And then, surprisingly on the other side of the ball, after a very rough offensive week against the Chicago Bears, the Vikings, fantasy-wise, were able to get it done at a pretty high level. Kirk Cousins, 35 of 45, 378 yards, 2 touchdowns, a pick, 22.02 fantasy points, making him the QB6. That was a start I absolutely hated this week. I'm sure not very many people made it, but if you did, congratulations. That is I don't even want to say the right read. That was just, it happened. It happened, so it is what it is. Kirk Cousins had a great week.
I mean, if we're being honest, the huge Jordan Addison touchdown was literally an interception ripped out of the DB's hand.
Yeah.
So it could have gone different, is what we're saying.
No, a lot, and that Jordan Addison, like the play he mentioned, that could go a lot different for Kirk Cousins and also Jordan Addison, who finished 7 catches, 123 yards, 10 targets, 2 touchdowns, 31.3 fantasy points. Have a day for the rookie. I mean, just an absolute monster game. Played 74% of snaps. And for all 3 of the main receivers, Addison had the huge week, but KJ Osborne, 5 catches, 47 yards on 6 targets, 9.7 fantasy points. Brandon Powell, 4 catches, 64 yards, 5 targets, 10.9 fantasy points. It's what you expect from these guys. I mean, you knew Jordan Addison was going to be the number 1, and then you just wondered how much can KJ Osborne step up? I honestly
How
thought it
much
would be
is
a
he
little
playing
more.
compared? Yeah, I was gonna ask, how much is he playing compared to Brandon Powell?
A lot
Is that
more.
that
A
a lot
lot
more?
more.
Okay.
I can confirm in 1 second. But I know KJ Osborne's out there just about the entire game. Brandon Powell's out there a lot less. Yeah, KJ Osborne out there 93% of snaps. And even when Justin Jefferson was there, KJ Osborne's lowest snap percentage is 83. Other than that, he's like 90% and above every single game. So KJ Osborne's out there more. But for 61% of snaps for Brandon Powell, you get 5 targets, catch 4 of them, 64 yards. It's a solid week. Someone we were really worried about, and I remember saying the Vikings are going to need to find different ways to get TJ Hawkinson involved because those linebackers for the Niners are so dominant, and they did. They were throwing tight end screens. They were finding different ways to get him the ball, and it worked. He had 11 catches, 86 yards on 12 targets, 19.6 fantasy points, a very good week against what looked like a tough matchup. I mean, all of the Vikings pass catchers performed very well. The running backs did not. Madison, 8 carries, 39 yards, 2 catches for 3 yards on 3 targets, 6.2 fantasy points, only played 53% of snaps. We'd seen him getting more and more workload, and Cam Akers, what seemed like was not getting phased out, but a very clear split between the two. And it was muddled a little bit this week. Cam Akers, 10 carries for 31 yards, 2 catches for 30 on 3 targets, 8.1. He actually got more fantasy points than Madison and played 39% of snaps. So, I mean, what that means going forward, we thought the Vikings would give Cam Akers his fair shot. It didn't seem like he'd really gotten that just yet. He looked all right in this game. They couldn't really run the ball efficiently with either running back, so not much to say there, but you get 30 yards. He had 1 catch that looked really good. So, I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
it was ugly on
I
the
don't
ground
know.
for the Vikings.
I mean, going forward with the Minnesota Vikings backfield, it's another one that we're gonna have. Hopefully, you have both Madison and Akers. So
Gosh, that's ugly though.
no, I mean, just for it's like if you have
Yeah,
one or the
yeah.
other, it's just so hard to tell right now. I've seen a lot of people saying, "Oh, I think it's gonna go in the direction of Akers," but the team likes Madison. Well, we just don't know. That's another one that it's probably going to be a couple weeks until we do know.
Yeah.
Until then, I mean, if it's a good matchup, I don't necessarily hate starting. Uh, I'd prefer to start Madison still
Yeah. Yeah.
until I see the flip. I'm still not trying to start Akers, but the possibility is there.
Mhm.
Yeah, if you're done with that
Let's
one.
get into it.
Right into the waiver wire. And this week, fortunately, it is more thin than usual. And that's going to be because there's not as many teams on bye. In fact, there's no teams on bye. So everybody should have all of their starters, if not for injury.
Yep.
Um, in fact, the only quarterback we have, if your quarterback happens to be down this week, which I don't see, if
Deshaun.
there's guys like, Deshaun, but there may be guys like Dak or CJ Stroud out there. We're just not mentioning them because they're rostered in well over 50%. Both like CJ Stroud's like 69% and Dak is above 70.
Mhm.
So it's not really a waiver wire player. But, if you do happen to have one of them available, those are the first options to go out and grab. Even Brock Purdy against Cincinnati, I'd even consider that because
Mhm.
it's just rough. I mean, some of the other guys like Baker against Buffalo, Stafford against Dallas, Russell Wilson against Kansas City, Ritter against Tennessee. It's like Minshew against New Orleans. I can't recommend any of these. The one lone decent option in the midst of all of them is Derek Carr.
Yeah.
After watching the last Thursday night game, you might think that is crazy to say, But despite that horrible showing, he got 18.4 fantasy points, and he would have had 22 had Foster Moreau made an even more crucial catch.
Mm-hmm.
He plays Indianapolis this week. Yes, they gave trouble to PJ Walker. I'm not worried about it. We've seen Trevor Lawrence have success against this. And I'm not comparing Derek Carr to Trevor Lawrence, but at the same time, we know they pass the ball a whole lot. You're hoping that, I mean, his last 3 games, 15.7, 17.3, 18.4. This isn't a crazy defense. If you need a quarterback, this is probably the direction I'd point you.
Yeah.
Rostered in 34% of leagues. He was. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it really, hopefully you have your quarterback this week. That's all I got to say.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you want to start us off on the running backs.
Sure. And, there's not too many guys, and it's tough when you have your full team because no one's on bye, barring injuries. A guy I have is Jamal Williams. He had a very poor outing his past game. It's just we saw what he was able to do last season with the Lions. He hasn't exactly been healthy this season. He's more of a handcuff for Kamara. He's only 42% rostered. Along with Derek Carr, they play the Colts. And we saw, Jerome Ford break crazy big run.
Kareem Hunt had 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, there's definitely possibility of getting in the end zone. We haven't seen Kamara and Jamal Williams together. Other than last game where Jamal barely played coming back from injury. He's known as being that kind of guy that steals touchdowns at the goal line. I don't know if that's going to be the case with the Saints, but if I have Kamara, I do like the Jamal Williams handcuff. He's only rostered 42% of leagues.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate him as a bench stash, definitely, because you never know. Kamara's an older running back. Obviously, I mean, I have him. He stays healthy for the rest of the year, getting crazy usage. Always good to have an insurance back.
Yeah.
I've got 3. My first one, I'm going to give a disclaimer before. So this guy's next 2 weeks, like we talked about before, it's Emery DeMercado. And I say this with caution because his next 2 weeks are Baltimore and Cleveland.
Yeah.
Baltimore and Cleveland happen to be very good against the run. Not only that, after these next 2 weeks, James Conner can come off of IR. So if that does happen and you're only getting DeMercado for these next 2 weeks against very tough matchups, it's hard to really recommend that, especially considering we saw him go from 73% of snaps down to 48 and only get 2 carries and then back to 80. We don't know what's going on in the mind of Jonathan Gannon. But if you are in a position where you need to, again, there are no buys this week. So hopefully you have all your guys. If you do have guys on injury, or that are injured, then, this is an option, but not my favorite.
Yeah.
Another guy that I did not write down, but also deserves a mention is Pierre Strong. With Jerome Ford being out 1 to 2 weeks, we saw an already split backfield with Kareem and Pierre Strong. Pierre Strong actually outsnapped Kareem. We know they like to run the ball, especially if Deshaun Watson isn't fully healthy. They're going to establish the run. Kareem is kind of the guy they go to on the goal line, but I think, if the guy has bursts, he might have an opportunity to break a long touchdown. He's behind a good offensive line. He might be a decent 1 or 2 week rental. After that, Devin Singletary. He's only 20% rostered. Going up against Carolina this week. Actually, a guy I really like if you do need a running back. He outsnapped and outproduced Dameon Pierce last week. If he continues, it's like have seen this before in the Texans backfield last year, but it was Rex Burkhead. Rex Burkhead is dust. Devin Singletary, we've seen have a lot of recent success on a very good team. We know he can be a viable running back. If he is going to end up as the lead back in Houston, obviously it's a guy that you're going to want to pick up off the waivers just because he's the lead back. If he's going to get a larger percent of the snaps and still, go back and forth with Pierce, I mean, this is a very good matchup. Carolina's terrible against the run. So I wouldn't hate like picking him up and throwing him in if you have a guy that's injured.
Yeah.
My last one, 57% rostered, but this is probably my favorite one, is Gus Edwards. Takes on Arizona this week. They are terrible against the run. We just saw them give up 66 yards to Royce Freeman, and I think it was like 87 to Darrell Henderson with a touchdown. Wait, that is the wrong
No, it
game.
was
They played Seattle.
the Seattle
Ken
105
Walker got like
yards.
105. Yeah. Switched up my weeks. But we saw Ken Walker get 105 on the ground, much like obviously Gus Edwards is not Ken Walker, but getting the bulk of the carries against a very weak run defense. I'd see him getting 60 or 70 yards. Could very well fall in the end zone.
Yeah.
I'm obviously might get a target or two, but that's not what we like Gus for. It's that rushing floor and the matchup against a very soft defense. If you can go out and get him, I mean, he's definitely not like in every week I'm rushing to start Gus Edwards, but he provides a floor that a lot of guys, when you're in need, do not.
Yeah.
And moving on to wide receivers, my first one is Brandon Powell. He's going to be taking on Green Bay. We just saw him have a good night against the Niners, so I'm not going to talk about him too much at all. He's increased a role in a high-powered passing offense. I say high-powered, it's more they just throw the ball a lot.
Why?
It's just the way it is. But yeah, I mean, Brandon Powell against Green Bay, good option. We just saw Cortland Sutton and Jared Jeudy, both of them 8. So yeah, and if you want to go on to your...
Yeah, I have, and again, I won't go crazy in depth on him. Yeah, Juwan Jennings versus Cincinnati. He's only 6% rostered. Again, he would be a very short-term rental because Debo probably will be back after their bye week 9. But if you're dealing with injury or whatever the case may be, Juwan Jennings pass game, 9 targets, 5 catches, 54 yards, 74% of snaps. He is the wide receiver 2 there. So he's definitely worth taking a shot on. I don't know if Trent Williams is going to miss again, but it almost felt like with Trent Williams missing and Brock having to scramble, Juwan ended up being that guy that would be open at the end of that scramble.
Yeah. So we'll see how that goes. But he's definitely an option that we have seen step up for the Niners before.
Yeah.
So with Debo out, I would definitely count on him to do it again, especially after getting 9 targets. I mean,
yeah.
So my next 2 are fairly simple guys that should just be rostered, in my opinion. One is Brandon Cooks. He plays LA this weekend. We just saw George Pickens and Deontay Johnson combined for 186 yards against them. I think Dak Prescott is just as capable as Matthew Stafford. And we are seeing, not only is Brandon Cooks getting targets, he's down the field, caught the touchdown in the last game. He played 78% of snaps in week 6, where he finished wide receiver 20. So, I mean, he's only 49% rostered. 49% rostered. Definitely a guy you should go out and pick up if available. Definitely worth throwing some fab on, especially if you're weak in the receiver area.
Yeah.
He will be off of bye for the rest of the year. Zay Jones is my final guy, 39% rostered. He's at least he's worth picking up because every time he plays, he is a top target for Trevor Lawrence. He's apparently like his favorite end zone target for some reason. And yeah, he's been out, but by no means, like, there's guys he should be rostered above. So by no means do I think that he should be out on the waiver wire like he is. In most leagues, he's out there, or he's only rostered in 39%. And I mean, it's fairly simple.
He's probably in my opinion, like at least speaking for our league, he's the best receiver on that waiver wire. If he is healthy, fantasy wise, he's the. Trevor Lawrence loves him. Loves him.
It's so very obvious, but that'll do it for the wide receivers. I have a couple tight ends. Dalton Schultz playing at Carolina. He's coming off the bye. Yeah, he's been hot. He had coming off 3 double-digit games. Almost all of them, I think, are above 15. He's 61% rostered, so he's a bit above, but definitely someone I wanted to mention because he's someone that you can have as an every week tight end beyond this point.
Yeah.
It's off of the bye now. And yeah, I mean, 3 games in a row of double digits from a tight end. It's enough consistency for me that, okay, I know that you can get above that. And now that he's integrated into that Houston offense, it's looking good.
Yeah.
Now.
This is a roll of the dice. And there's no buys this week, which makes it tough.
For that reason, I'm not saying to play him this week. But if you can go out and pick this guy up for when your tight end goes on by, we've seen what he can do. We know that they're going to involve him in this offense. Paid him too much money. I'm talking about Taysom Hill. He only 13% rostered. He's had back-to-back double-digit fantasy weeks. I mean, we know he's going to continue. They have packages for him at the goal line. They got packages for him at receiver, at tight end, at wildcat quarterback. It doesn't matter. Taysom Hill's on the field. They love him. So he should at least be rostered. I'm not saying he's an every week starter, but at the very least, throw him on your team. And then, do you have any for tight ends?
Yeah, I have one more really quick, though. Do you know how old Taysom Hill is?
Tell me.
Just take one guess. He's been in the league 7 years.
36.
That's crazy old. No, he's 33. I don't know why. It feels like he's been in the league forever, and then at the same time it doesn't. When I just saw that he was 33, I was like, wow, he is. I mean, I'm pretty sure Travis Kelce's 34, and you think about how long he's been in the league. So, just a random side note. That kind of surprised me. But yeah, Taysom Hill gets used for. I don't even know why they gave him that contract in the first place. They really thought he could take over for Breeze. That's ridiculous. On the other side of the age pool, a very young tight end, Dalton Kincaid, rostered in 61% of leagues. More than likely he got drafted, and I guess some teams are still holding him, which is honestly crazy to me because he's shown no indication to why you should hold him up to this point. But this past week, 8 catches, 75 yards on 8 targets. Best week of the season. Dawson Knox is having wrist surgery, out for at least 3 to 4 weeks. Dalton Kincaid is for sure worth rostering. I mean, I don't know if I'm starting him right away, depending on who your tight end is, but he's a guy I'm even considering starting if I have, like, a lower end tight end.
I mean, at the very least, even if you don't need him, go flip him.
Yeah, we talk about that all the time. If you don't need Zay Jones, pick him up. If he has a solid week, flip him for something you do need. Dalton Kincaid, any of these guys. That's just what it is. It's not always you need the guy on the waiver. It's what the guy on the waiver can get you that you do need.
Yeah, another guy I guess that's worth mentioning. It's going to be a probably tough week for him against Baltimore. We did see Sam Laporta have a good week in garbage time, which that game might end up in. I don't know. Crazy things have happened every week. Trying to predict what will happen on a week-to-week basis is insane. But Trey McBride, with Zach Ertz going on IR, this wasn't a guy that we had prepared, but just with obviously, Ertz going on IR, he becomes the number 1 tight end in that room. I'm not worried about the other guys stepping in.
No.
So I think McBride, obviously his targets, his snap share should go up.
Yeah.
And yeah, just the last guy I wanted to mention. A defense that I like this week, if they're available, the New York Jets are going to the Giants to play. Should be good for them.
Yeah.
And
We
that'll do
good?
it with this one.
All right, wrap her up.
All right, guys. Once again, any questions, comments you may have, anything you might want to see us add to the show or do differently, any comments at all, we'd love to see them, and we will respond to you in a timely manner. Any help you might need with your fantasy team, trade ideas, whatever it may be, always here for you. Thank you once again for the support. We couldn't do this without you guys. So, as we say every time, come back, take more reps with the first team.
Yes, sir.